So the new Masteries gave the wand a lot of possibilities to actually deal a lot of damage in PvE, and the Invocator is utilizing the wand just really well. I'm currently always a top 3 contributor on world bosses. I even had over 5% contribution on arc boss events, and also in every dungeon run I'm doing, I'm always tanking the boss. And now you might think this guy just probably has crazy gear. But as you can see, I'm mostly still in tier 1 gear. No fancy arc boss weapons or whatsoever. And you can do the same. I'm not doing anything special here. That's why in this guide we will talk about the active skills, the passive skills, the masteries, the rotation, the gear, the runes, the artifacts, just everything. You ready? Let's go! So let's start with the active skills. One of the biggest strengths of the Invocator is the self-buffing possibilities. So you have high focus, which gives you crazy cooldown speed and max damage. Then you have enchanting time, which gives you crazy skill damage boost. And you have valorous barrier, which also increases your max damage. If we now just use all of those 3 buffs, we are just getting so many passive stats. Even here with an almost tier 1 gear, we have 674 max base damage, 89% cooldown speed and 743 skill damage boost. This will just heavily increase our damage. Okay, so this is of course already really strong. But let's come to our damage skills. So generally, when you do a dungeon build, you always want to focus as much as possible on single target damage, because it's always just about killing the end boss as fast as possible. It's of course also good to have a little bit of AoE damage to kill the trash mobs faster, but the main focus should always be single target damage. Of course you can also create 2 skill layouts, but I just really like to have just 1 skill layout for dungeons. Let's start with our wand skills. So if you want to deal damage with the wand, we of course need to play with curses. First of all, we have Touch of Despair. This is just a simple single target dot. We can stack this up 3 times on our target. And then we have Decaying Touch. So this is usually an AoE ability, which also has a short cast time. But we can remove the cast time and make it a single target spell. And as mentioned, we focus here on single target DPS, and removing the cast time here is of course really helpful for us. Now the last curse ability we will take is Curse Explosion. This ability deals damage depending on all remaining dot damage on the target. So the longer the dots are on your target, the more damage this ability does. So if we have Touch of Despair and Decaying Touch on the target, we just deal more damage with this ability. So it's really just the longer the dots are, the more damage this ability actually does. Now these are already all the curse spells. Now let's come to the staff abilities. Okay, so the first 2 abilities that we have from the staff are always applying our burning stacks. First of all, we have the focused fire bombs, which we make to a chargeable ability, which deals really good damage already and has quite a bit of AoE damage, and as mentioned, it applies burning stacks. And next we have Hellfire Rain. This is by far your best ability in your kit. This ability is just ridiculously strong. This ability just lets 30 meteors rain onto your target. And of course it's a big area. And for example on this dummy here, I won't be able to hit all the meteors onto the small dummy. But the good thing is, in dungeons, the bosses just have really big hitboxes. So when we call our meteors, we will just hit all of those. And if you hit all of those, this is by far the best scaling ability in the game. And additionally, it also applies burning stacks. Okay, now we have Fireball Barrage, which shoots up to 20 fireballs onto your target. This is depending on your burning stacks on your target. But usually you should always have 10 burning stacks. That means you will always shoot the maximum amount of fireballs, which is 20. And this one has also really good scaling, and especially it has no cast time. So this one is really strong also. Then we have of course our lightning skills. We have Chain Lightning, which also deals more damage if we have more burning stacks on our target. And additionally it has a really short cooldown. And we have Judgment Lightning, which is also just a really heavy hitting skill, which has no cast time. And the last active ability, which is of course always needed, is Inner Peace. Because the build is really mana hungry and you will run out of mana in dungeons most of the time. At least as long as you are not completely min-maxed. Okay, this would be all the active skills we would take. You can find of course a link to all the skill specialization in the video description. Now we need to talk about the passive skills, but when we are talking about the passives, we just have to talk also about the masteries, because the masteries are just influencing our passives. So let's start with the Wand Masteries. The only reason why the Invocator is so crazy strong right now is because of the Wand Masteries. So let me explain why. First of all, we have here Vampiric Onslaught. For this you need to understand the basic passive Vampiric Contract. So usually you heal your target with 70% of your damage as long as the target is cursed. Means that you have, for example, one of your dots on your enemy, and now 70% of your damage you're dealing to this target, you heal someone else. So I have selected here now myself, and that's why you see all the healing numbers here over my head. I just heal myself for 17% of my damage. So if we activate now Vampiric Onslaught, we don't heal ourselves anymore. But now we deal 17% of our damage again onto the target. This just comes on top of our normal damage. And the only requirement for that is that we curse our target up front. So again, I just have to use here my curse on my target. And now, for example, if I use Judgment Lightning, you can see that this ability is creating two damage numbers, because it's the initial damage of the ability plus the 17% which comes then on top. And bosses will be always cursed by us. We will always deal here 17% damage on top. But important here, this does not count for dots. So it just works for all of your staff abilities and curse explosion. But it's still crazy powerful. Okay, now the next mastery, which is incredibly strong, is Malicious Focus. Now every time we land a wand skill onto our enemy, we get stacks that gives us 2.4% more magic damage. And this stacks up 3 times, which means we get 7.2% more magic damage. And both our weapons are magic weapons. So we just increase our damage by 7.2%. And since this buff will last for 15 seconds, we will have here always a 100% uptime on this. So this is again really strong. So sadly we can only activate 2 passives in each ring, which means we sadly can't take here Battle Spirit anymore, which would also increase our base damage. It's also a really strong passive, but as an Invocator, both other passives just heavily outshine this one. Now we come to the second ring, and here we have the next completely broken passive, Warrior Gambit. The description here is a little bit misleading. We are not increasing our base damage by 25%. That would be a little bit ridiculous. To understand what it does, we have to look on the passive Noble Revival. So usually you get, depending on your max mana, more healing power. Now with the new passive you get more max damage depending on your max mana. So the more max mana we have, the more base damage we are getting. And it's now 25% of this 3% here, which means 0.75% per 1000 max mana. But this is just still really good. To give you an idea how good this passive is, let's see how much that is in my current build. So as you can see, we have currently 507 max damage. Now if we remove here the passive, now we can see that we lose 40 base damage. And this build is of course not optimized yet. If we get more max mana, it's of course getting even better. So again, a really powerful mastery point. Okay, the next one is Malicious Intent, which increases our curse damage by 15%, which is of course straightforward, which will just give us a little bit of a damage boost. And lastly we have Abyssal Burst. So this one can be also really strong. Every time when we are doing a hit onto our enemy, we have the chance to passively trigger our curse explosion. This can be really strong, especially if you do a lot of hits. We as an Invocator, we are not doing as many hits as some other classes, but it still will trigger from time to time and will deal a little bit of damage. So all the other passives are not really relevant. We are now just trying to get the most damage out of all the smaller nodes here. Oh, and I have a question from Wolfgang. 1 second. Okay, this is a good point. That's really nice. Wolfgang has just brought up 2 really good questions. So first of all, he asked about Corrupting Hit and why we don't take it. So Corrupting Hit has a chance to apply a random curse every time you hit an enemy with an auto attack. But now the question is, when do we do auto attacks? If I do here just a simple combo, you will see that my character is not doing any auto attacks, right? So this is because if you're using abilities, your character can't perform an auto attack, and you will always constantly spam your abilities. That means usually you shouldn't do any auto attacks. So this is why this passive is just completely useless. So the second question Wolfgang asked was regarding Devotion of Emptiness. And this is actually a really good question. So what this passive does, it's increasing your healing power during the day and your curse damage during the night. For us, of course, only the night effect is really relevant because we want to deal more damage, right? And the problem is that if we look now here onto our 3-star dungeons, then we will notice that in these dungeons, it's always day. In the 2-star dungeons, it's always night. And in the 1-star dungeons, it's always day again. So for 3-star dungeons, the passive is just really not that useful. But now there are again 2 really nice passives here in the mastery tree. Both of these masteries increase the day and the night effect. So this is of course really good already. But additionally, if you have both of these passives, then you will have the day and the night effect 24/7 up. So that means if we take both of these passive, we could deal actually a lot more curse damage. But here's the problem again, that we can only have 2 passives active in one ring. And in the first we just have already these 2 insane passives that we want to have active all the time. And I tried here a lot on dummies what actually deals more damage. But no matter how I configured everything, these 2 passives are just way too good. And you will always have significant more damage with these 2 passives here. Okay, does that answer your question, Wolfgang? Yes? Perfect. Wolfgang is happy, so I'm also happy. Okay, then let's come back to our passives. The last passive we will take here from the wand is Wraith Beacon. This will increase the duration of our curses. And that means that our curse explosion will deal more damage because it's depending on the duration of the dots. And if the dots last longer on the enemy, then curse explosion will deal more damage. So this is again a really good passive here. Okay, now let's come to the stuff. Okay, so first of all, we will take here Strategic Compromise, which just increases the value of Forbidden Sanctuary, which means we are getting more skill damage boost, which is of course really good. Then we are taking Flame Discipline. This will just shoot constantly a fireball onto nerdy targets. At the beginning, this one is just really good because it just will increase a little bit here our damage, but later on, if we have better gear, we have to change this ability because we don't want to stay then that close anymore to our target. But at the beginning, this will give us just a little bit more damage. Now we don't play with Arctic Thunder, we just got it because of the smaller nodes here. We would deal here more damage with our lightning skills if we apply a frost effect beforehand, which we will of course never do, so we don't care about that. In the next ring we will take Firewave Amplifier, which will increase our AoE damage of our focused firebomb, which is of course just really nice here for killing trash, but it's also not really needed in dungeons. And lastly we have here Power Surge, which in theory sounds really great, right? We are again increasing our max damage dependent on our max mana. It's similar to Noble Revival from the wand, right? The problem is this ability has just such a horrible scaling. Again, let's have a look. We have now the passive in, and now we have 507 max damage. Now let's remove the passive, and now we have 499 max damage. So this ultimate ability just gave us 8 max damage. 8! Only max damage, this is nothing. Noble Revival from the wand gave us 40 base damage. And not only max damage, it was also min damage. The problem is that there's not really something better to take in PvE. When it comes to PvE, we are just often really limited here in the masteries. These are actually all the masteries that we need in this tree here. Now we just take smaller mastery nodes that give us more damage. Okay, now let's come to the last 2 passives that we take here. First of all, we will take here Flame Consideration, which just increases here our burning damage and gives us more heavy attack chance. And we are taking Mana Amp, which heavily increases our mana, which is of course really strong because the more max mana we have, the more base damage we are getting. And additionally, we're also getting here some additional max HP. Okay, that was now a really detailed explanation on all the masteries and passives. But I just hope that you now understood all of those and really know what is really important here. Now let's talk about combos. You guys always want to have a detailed explanation on the combos. But what if I tell you that combos in PvE and Throne Liberty are most of the time completely useless. Most of the time it really does not matter in which order you use your abilities, because most of the time you will have all your cooldowns up anyways. It's not about using them in the right order, it's about prioritizing which ones you should use. It's just because we have so many deadly markers in the game, and deadly markers just reduce your cooldown so heavily. So of course the initial rotation on the boss can be a little bit impactful, but after your initial rotation it's actually more or less completely whatever. Then it's just always important that you prioritize the right abilities. And in this build, your most important ability is your Hellfire Rain. Whenever this is up, you always should prioritize this ability, because the damage is just so broken. The next ability you should prioritize afterwards is Fireball Barrage. If you have 10 burning stacks, and you should have this all the time, then this ability deals also crazy amount of damage. And the good thing is, it has no cast time. So this one is also really strong, you always want to prioritize. And then it's mostly just focusing on all your other staff abilities. And the last important spells are for sure always your curse abilities. Of course, they also deal good damage, but it's not even close. It's not even close to the damage you do with your staff abilities. Okay, now we know how to prioritize our abilities, but how does our initial rotation look like? Okay, so first of all, before you want to use your damage abilities, you of course always want to buff yourself. Here it's just important that you always use your high focus first, because you will get here the additional cooldown speed. And then you just use your 2 other buffs. What is also really helpful here, that you make those 2 abilities, so Enchanting Time and Valeria's Barrier, always cast on yourself. So you make the shortcut that it always targets yourself, because you can apply those buffs of course also to your party members. But you don't want to do this. You always want to apply this onto you. So if you don't want to accidentally apply the buff to a teammate, just rebind the shortcut that you always target yourself. So, but after you buffed yourself, you always want to use Touch of Despair on your enemy, because initially we want to curse our enemy and that we deal here our additional damage. And then we start channeling Hellfire Rain, because Hellfire Rain is just by far our most broken ability and we want to use it as often as possible. Then we use our focused Firebomb to actually get 10 burning stacks. And then it's not about the combo anymore, then we are just prioritizing the right abilities. It's nothing super special, it's just about having the right skills, having the right masteries and having the right passives. Now let's come to the gear. I will keep this here rather short because I will have a more detailed guide coming out soon where it's all about gearing correctly in PvE. But let me explain you a little bit the major decisions we did here. Let's start here with the weapons. So of course your goal should be always to get the Dagon stuff. This is of course harder to get, but this should be your ultimate goal. If you don't want to wait till you get the stuff, you can also go here for this abyssal stuff, which is also a good alternative for PvE. For the Wand, there are a couple of options. No Wand here is really outstanding, all the passives are just really useless. It does not matter what Wand you have, you won't increase heavily your damage output. That's why I think this one here is the best, because it has good base damage and additionally it gives good stats. This 20% mana cost efficiency is really good. In the late game in tier 2 you will spam your abilities. You will have so much attack speed, no cooldowns, and without mana cost efficiency you will lose a lot of DPS. So that's why I think this is just a really good wand. Now let's talk about the armor sets. If you want to increase your range damage, there are 2 good sets. You have this Spectral 2-piece, which increases your crit damage if no enemy is in a 5 meter range of you. And this one can give you up to 25% crit damage. And then you have the Transcendent 4-piece, which increases your damage the further you are away from your target. This one can give you up to 40% more crit damage. Sounds great, right? But it's way worse. This is the case because usually you want to stay close to your teammates. You don't want to stay far away from each other. This is just because you want the additional base damage from Blood Devotion, you want the additional attack speed from Da Vinci, you want the additional skill damage boost from Bastion, and you want the additional heavy attack chance from the Spear. If you stand too far away from your enemy, you won't be able to get these buffs, and it's super bad. And this will just lower your damage. You always want to be as close as possible to your melee players. And other than that, we are just focusing here a lot on base stats, heavy attack chance and attack speed. These are by far the 3 most important stats when it comes to dealing damage. But more details on that in the upcoming guide. Now let's have a quick look onto the runes. So of course you go for rune synergies in the weapons just because they are really efficient there, but on all the accessories we go for boss magic heavy attack chance. I already made a guide about that in the past, and we will also talk about that again in the upcoming guide, but you just have to understand that getting 960 magic heavy attack chance here against bosses is incredibly strong, and you won't get any rune synergies that out damage these 960 heavy attack chance. This is not possible. Yes, there are diminishing returns, yada yada yada, it's still by far the best. It's not even close. But as mentioned, we will talk about that more in the upcoming guide. Now let's talk about the artifacts. In PvE for DPS classes, there's only one set that is really good, and that's the Chaos set. Not really because of the critical hit chance, but what is really important is the critical damage, which will of course again heavily increase our damage here. And since the critical strike chance is not that important and the active and passive ability is way better in PvP than in PvE, I would always replace that here with the Ancestral set. So the passive here increases your base damage when you drop below 40% HP, which is not super insane, but it can at least be situational, be really useful. And the active gives us 5000 HP for 10 seconds, which can be really useful sometimes to maybe survive a boss mechanic or something similar. And additionally, we are also getting here 1500 more max HP, which is of course always really good. And for this we are only sacrificing 124 crit, which as mentioned is not that important for us. For the traits on the artifacts, just try to get some offensive traits that are useful for you. Getting the right traits is really hard here, so just try to get really offensive traits all the time. Okay, that's it. These were quite a bit of information. I just hope I didn't forget anything. If I have changes here, I will of course always update my quest log links, so you will be always up to date. If there will be any bigger changes, I will of course do an updated video on that. But that's it. So this was a little bit of a different video this time. So usually I do way more editing, and of course I'm usually not in the video. So yeah, a little bit of a different style. Please let me know in the comments, did you like this one? What kind of style do you like more? Okay, but if you like the content, don't forget to like, subscribe and do all those nice stuff. Thanks for watching and see ya in the next one.